Hi, it's Andy, and today I'm coming to you with the second half of my March wrap-up. So in March I ended up reading 31 books. 31 books. Insert the sound I've been waiting to use.
Wow.
So I managed to read 31 books, so what I did was I did a halfway wrap-up that you'll have already seen, and then there's this wrap-up which is my second part wrap-up, which is just everything I read for the latter half of the month, basically. So I've got 15 books here to show you. 15 or 16, I'm not entirely sure. So I'm just going to go over them and my thoughts. Please ignore my face. My face has decided to break out, and I don't know what my hair's doing, even though it probably looks fine. I just not feeling great today, but I really want to get this filmed. I'm just throwing like hand signs up now. So continuing on from the last video, the next thing I read was Carmilla by Sheridan Le Fanu. I'm not entirely sure. Look at that cover. This was a total cover buy. Like, look at that. I don't think the hardback's just like a standard black hardback with the writing on the spine, but this is the most beautiful. I saw this in Toppings in Edinburgh when we went to see Rocky Horror. My god, I just blanked there. So I saw this in Toppings. We nipped into Toppings before we went along to the theatre, and I could not resist. Carmilla is one of those classics that I've always wanted to read. It is the original vampire story, so Carmilla is a vampire. I'm not entirely sure when it's set, but it was written before Dracula was part of the inspiration for Dracula, and it's about a vampire named Carmilla who comes to this house and befriends the daughter and I suppose feeds on her. It's a sort of sapphic coded gothic novel, novella. It's a very short read, very quick read. Interesting. It's one of those ones where not much happens but a lot is implied, so that was interesting. It's very much the most accessible classic I think I've ever read. However, again, not much happens, so I'm glad that I've read this. I literally cannot stop shining this in the light. I love it. I'm glad I read it, and it'll be going up on my nice new classic shelves. The next thing I read was The Girl Behind the Wall by Mandy Robotham. I talked about this in one of my vlogs. I was disappointed in this. It wasn't as good as I was expecting, although the further away I get from it, the more I start to like it, the more I think about it. So that seems to be how I'm going with a lot of books these days. So maybe on reread it will be better again. So this follows two siblings, Karen and Jutta, who are living in Berlin at the time that the Berlin Wall goes up. It starts on the night that the Berlin Wall goes up. One of the sisters has been taken. Karen has had her appendix has kind of like exploded, so she gets rushed to the hospital, and Jutta is at home, and when the wall goes up, Karen is trapped on the wrong side of the wall, and it's basically Jutta trying to figure out a way to get her back, and she discovers this way that she can get through the wall and goes to visit Karen. But Karen has been there, it's been a couple of years, and she has found a man and fallen in love and has gotten used to living on that side of the Berlin Wall. And this carries on these sister stories through the entirety of the time that the Berlin Wall is up, and you see them on the day that the Berlin Wall comes down. It's a very evocative and emotional story, and I'm sure if you know more about the Berlin Wall and more about that sort of thing, it will be really interesting, but it didn't hold me the whole time I was reading it. Again, maybe on reread it would be better, but I certainly enjoyed it. It wasn't a bad book. I'm just saying it was like a 3.54 instead of like a 5-star. I'm just being super critical. The next one is Out of the Easy by Ruta Sepetys. I love Ruta Sepetys. I have loved just about everything Ruta Sepetys has written, and again she's kind of knocked this one out of the park with the setting of New Orleans. This is basically about our main character, whose name I can't remember, Josie, who is a well-known prostitute's daughter in New Orleans, and while her mother works for the madam, she cleans and also cleans in the brothel and also works and lives in this bookshop, which, you know, living in a bookshop. And basically it chronicles her life. Her mum is constantly getting into trouble because she doesn't care about Josie. Like, she pretty much had Josie for the fact of like, oh, look at me, I had a child. She never wanted children, it's very obvious. The madam kind of becomes like a second mother to her, or a first mother really, because her mum really isn't a mother to her. And it's just, it is such a nice read. It looks at family and family ties and different kinds of love that we have, because there's a friend in this that she loves like a brother, and then thinks about possibly being with romantically, and then things happen. There's a boy that she does like romantically, but he's from like the wrong side of the track, so she's comfortable flirting with him, knowing that nothing will really happen, but will it? And then, you know, obviously her mum, she's not really got a relationship with her, despite the fact that she's around, but the madam treats her like a daughter, loves her like a daughter. The people that work in this brothel, who are the prostitutes and work as like other things, they love the family, the fine family that they have there, they look after each other. And then the owner of the bookshop, who's the friend's dad, he has pretty bad dementia or Alzheimer's, and it's kind of been kept hidden because they'll send him to an asylum. But again, Josie loves him like a father, so it's that really difficult thing of trying to care for him and hide his secret in the 1920s, 30s type thing. But I absolutely love this. Again, a time period I normally wouldn't read from, but AZebraReads always does these so much justice. This cast is just so diverse, so brilliant, and I absolutely love this. So after reading a few fairly like heavy-ish books and having not a great time of it, I was feeling really down and decided to do my periodical read of Heartstopper. But this time I tabbed it. So I tabbed all of the volumes of Heartstopper with the colour tabs that go with their spine. And I'm just so happy with this. It makes me so happy. I've tabbed everything that I thought was either really important or that made me smile, like specifically made me really happy. And you can just see how many tabs are in this for a graphic novel. Like, there was even bits where I wanted to tab like every panel, but I tabbed like the start and the end, if that makes sense, if it was like a few pages long. And I just love this so much. We all know by now I love Heartstopper. Like, it is one of my favourite things ever. One of the best graphic novel series I've ever read. Saying that, I've read like 3, including Heartstopper, this, Saga, and One Punch Man. Did not like One Punch Man. It's not my thing. But yeah, I absolutely love Heartstopper. Everything Heartstopper, I absolutely love. This, if you have been living under a rock, is about Nick and Charlie, who are at an all boys high school, and they are put into the same form group, which is like a registration class basically, and they start talking and they fall in love. Charlie's out and gay and has been horrendously bullied for the last year since he was sort of accidentally yanked out of the closet, and Nick is a lad rugby boy, straightest boy anybody can ever see that is actually not quite so straight. And it's about Nick discovering his sexuality along with Charlie dealing with a lot of mental health issues. There are a lot of triggers in this for people, so please do look it up if you are going to read these, but these are just... I cannot describe to you how much I love Heartstopper. I could go on and on about Heartstopper. I could do an in-depth look into Heartstopper for so long. I mean, some of these things, like, they're just... look at them, they're so cute. I love Nick and Charlie. And Volume 5 will be the last volume. Alice has just started releasing it on Webtoons. I cannot wait, but I'm also very sad that will be the end of Nick and Charlie as we know them in Heartstopper. And yeah, I don't know how else to describe this. Just give it a chance. My friends will tell you I was so against reading Heartstopper, and now it's my favourite. This empty shelf here, this is going to be my Heartstopper collection. So I've got my paperbacks that I've just shown you. I've got the Heartstopper yearbook, the Heartstopper Waterstones hardback editions. So there's 3 more of these to come this year, and then hopefully they'll release 5 as well. And then I've got the Waterstones paperback, which, by the way, I will get more. I will get all 5 of them if they release all 5 of them. And the TV tie-in as well. So yeah, if it's out and it's Heartstopper, I've got it. The only one I don't have is the colouring book, and that's just because it's a colouring book. But yeah, this whole shelf is at some point going to be Heartstopper because I just love it so much. The next thing I read was The Record of a Spaceborne Few, or just Record of a Spaceborne Few by Becky Chambers. This is the continuation of the Wayfarers series. There are 4 books in this series. This is number 3, and this follows Tessa, who is Ashby's sister, who stayed on the ship. Basically, there was a Earth got destroyed because, you know, what we're doing right now, and there was like 3 different groups. So one group stayed on Earth that mostly died out, one group terraformed and lived on Mars, and the third group went to the skies. So they made these massive ships that are like, think big sci-fi city ships, like that sort of thing, and they have been living in these ships called the Exodus Fleet, and they don't have any, or most of them don't have any plans to ever leave the fleet. They will, you know, just stay in the fleet for their lives. And this follows a few characters, and so Tessa, Ashby's sister, and other characters who are involved in the record keeping and the history of the Exodus Fleet and of the people. And it's really looking at the whole thing about whether to stay at home or to go, because Tessa's debating whether or not to stay on the Exodus Fleet or to go planetside. We've got a kid in here called Kit who just wants to get off the fleet and wants to go planetside, but also is very, very tied to the history. And then we've got Isabel, who is the record keeper for one of the record keepers for the ships, and she is older and has lived on the fleet her whole life. It's just such a beautiful story about people, and that's really the grit of what Becky Chambers does. It just looks at people, and I really, really enjoyed this. I really did. Next up, I continued my read of The Heroes of Olympus with Mark of Athena. This is the third book in this 5-book series, and it follows our Greek and Roman demigods as they try to save the gods and save the world again. And this is a continuation from Percy Jackson, so I don't want to ruin Percy Jackson or spoil too much of it. This is book 3 in the series, but basically it's just a continuation on Annabeth is to follow the Mark of Athena while they also try and get across Rome. It's just such an interesting one. I love this one. I think possibly one of my favourites. They get to meet Hercules, and it's just like meeting godly siblings is really, really funny. Like the Golden Boy as well. It's just the fact, like, the characters meeting their godly siblings and being like, it's beautiful. Yeah, that's all I can really say about this. These books, this series, I do have a big problem with it because, and look away if you mute it if you don't want spoilers. So what I'll do, I'll hold my hand up for spoilers, mute me if you don't want spoilers, and I'll put my hand down when I finish talking spoilers. So, the problem I have with the series is that Rick Riordan uses the word schizophrenic quite a lot, and incorrectly. He has written this with the gods split between the 2 aspects, and it is like a split personality disorder sort of thing where the 2 aspects are fighting within the body, as it were, because the Greeks aspects were taken over to the Roman gods and changed Zeus to Jupiter, blah blah blah, and the 2 sides are fighting with each other as the war is brewing between the 2 types of demigods. And for that he uses the descriptive of schizophrenic. The gods are schizophrenic, the gods are acting schizophrenic, you know, and it is incorrect for a start, because schizophrenia is nothing to do with split personalities. That's split personality disorder, which is a completely different thing now called dissociative identity disorder, which if you've seen any other videos I have lots of thoughts on, because it is portrayed in media very, very poorly, and often to the downfall of the person with the ID, shown them as quite often as violent, when more often than not they are usually the victims of crimes. But the use of it in here, it makes sense for the time. I think if he re-released them now he would choose a different word, because even it's not DID, because DID is a trauma-based survival instinct. disorder. I could go watch Dissociated or another DID person on YouTube if you want more about DID, but for me, the use of schizophrenia every time it happens, it really jars me out of the story because it's just so poorly used and it really gets on my nerves. Okay, I'm done with that. No more talking about that. Also, with Mark of Athena, can I just point out, it took me how long to realise that was an owl? I just thought it was eyes. So for my next read, I decided to jump back into the Wayward Children series, and I read Down Among the Sticks and Bones, which is Jack and Jill's story. So Jack and Jill, you get to kind of know in the first book, and I can't remember the name of that, whatever the name is for that. But Down Among the Sticks and Bones is about Jack and Jill when they find their door. So the Wayward Children series is about Eleanor West's Home for Wayward Children, which is a school where children who have gone through a door, you know, Narnia type thing, gone through a wardrobe and found another land, fallen down a rabbit hole, that sort of thing. When they come back and they are not able to cope with coming back because they often find their perfect worlds, they go to Eleanor West School to learn to cope and in hope of finding their doors again. There's a separate school for those who do not want to ever go back to help them deal with the trauma, but this school specifically is usually for children who want to go back to their worlds, and it's for them to be there somewhere safe, somewhere surrounded by people who understand, while they look for their door. And on every door, before they go through, there's a sign above the door that says "Be sure." So Jack and Jill go through this door and go to this land that is basically, it seems sort of barren. There are 4 directions that they could go in, 4 different kingdoms, and they choose one that's kind of like a Van Helsing-y type thing, a vampire and a Frankenstein-y guy type thing. And then the story jumps and she's like, yeah, okay, so stuff happens while they're living there, but I'm not going to tell you about that. Here's what happens later on. And it tells about how they came back to Eleanor West School. And that jarred me. I didn't like that. I didn't like the jump. I didn't like the bit of the book that I wanted was cut out. And that is intentional. It's the bit in the middle is the bit that I want to read. And that is the bit that was taken away. That is not written. So for me, and the fact that I don't like Jack and Jill as characters, I could never remember which one was which. And you didn't even get to develop them very much as characters. I don't know if Sean Maguire was leaning on the fact that we got a lot of development of them in the first book, but this just was not for me, and I considered just completely giving up on the series. But as you'll see later, I did not, and that is a good thing. The next 3 I read, I'm just going to wrap up as a winner because they are a 3-part novella series, so they are the Percy Jackson Kane Chronicle crossover books, crossover novellas, and that is The Son of Sobek, The Staff of Serapis, and The Crown of Ptolemy. And in these books, like I said, there's a crossover between Percy Jackson and the Kane Chronicles. The Kane Chronicles, if you don't know, is an Egyptian god-based Percy Jackson style trilogy. So you've got Sadie and Carter Kane, who are brother and sister, and they're descendants of the pharaohs, and because of that can be vessels or avatars for the gods. And Percy Jackson is about demigods, Greek demigods, so the children of gods and humans, and the gods are from the Greek pantheon. So this is a crossover. So Son of Sobek has Percy meeting Carter when there's this crocodile, Son of Sobek. Sobek, if you know, is a sort of crocodile god in Egyptian mythology, and there's this massive crocodile, and of course because it's in the water, Percy is sent to figure out what it is. Because it's a giant crocodile, you know, Son of Sobek, Carter goes to find out what it is, and they meet when they are fighting, and they don't know if each other are enemy or what, and they have to work together to destroy this Son of Sobek. Very suspicious of each other, and kind of end their relationship there, decide to end their relationship there. The next book, which is The Staff of Serapis, sees Annabeth and Sadie meet and work together to destroy Serapis, who is trying to coalesce back together. He is a mixture of Greek Egyptian god, so Ptolemy is actually the general of Alexander the Great, and he was given the pharaoh ship, I suppose, by Alexander on his death. So Alexander the Great conquered parts of Egypt and brought in the Greek mythology to mix with the Egyptian mythology, and Ptolemy really pushed for that. So this god Serapis was a mixture of Greek and Egyptian, so in order to defeat him they needed a mixture of Greek and Egyptian, hence Sadie and Annabeth coming together. The last book, The Crown of Ptolemy, is about our sort of main villain who's sort of done all this stuff in the background in the previous books, who is trying to get the Crown of Ptolemy, basically. So Ptolemy ruled both North and Upper and Lower Egypt, which are south and north, because the Nile runs south to north, not north to south. So confusing. Upper Egypt is in the south, Lower Egypt in the north. Anyway, so if you combine the two crowns, the crown of Upper and Lower Egypt, you get the Crown of Ptolemy. He's trying to put that together to become like a god pharaoh, basically. And it is up to Percy, Annabeth, Sadie and Carter to stop him by using a mixture of Greek and Egyptian, and it is fantastic. I love this book. I love this trilogy in general, but the last one coming all together, it was just fantastic. Like, Sadie is so much like Percy and Annabeth is so much like Carter, and they just together, like, it's so funny. They're just so funny together. Like, at least Percy listens to Annabeth. Sadie does not listen to Carter. She just goes running in headfirst, and it's so funny because by this point this is after the events of the Heroes of Olympus, so Percy and Annabeth are like 17 and Sadie and Carter are like 13, 14. So the age gap is really, really funny, especially with Sadie, who's just like gung-ho 13-year-old kid, and Annabeth's like, you need to chill out. And Percy's like, I agree with her. And Annabeth's like, she's a child. And Percy's like, I still agree with her, but maybe we should listen to you a little bit. It's just so funny. I loved it. I love these characters together. It's a perfect mixture, a perfect crossover, and just, again, opens the idea of all these worlds being together. The Egyptian gods, the Greek gods, the Roman gods. What other gods do we have? But obviously Rick Riordan hasn't written any more about any other gods other than the Norse. Ignore me, Magnus Chase follows the Norse gods. He has opened up his name, I suppose, to lean some sort of weight behind other authors and to allow them to write about their mythology. So I believe there's one for Native American mythology, one for African mythology, or certain African mythology, because there's lots of mythologies. It's just, I don't know off the top of my head what it is. But anyway, fantastic trilogy, absolutely loved it. Loved to see all the characters together. Rick Riordan just batting it out the park again. Just fantastic job. The next thing I read was The Galaxy and the Grand Within, which is the last in the Wayfarers quartet. There's 4 of them, so yeah, quartet. This is a novel. Again, this takes place, they all kind of take place around about the same time. This follows a few characters. So there's Pei, who we meet in the first one, and there are a few other characters who we've not met yet, all of different species who don't necessarily usually interact, and they have gone to the I cannot remember. It's so difficult for me to say. Wait a minute. I can't find it but it's like the 1-stop shop. It's got a really strange but like fun name, and basically they all end up here and something goes terribly wrong, and they look outside in this little terraform bubble and there is a fire in the sky and all the satellites go down. So basically they are stuck in this little pod, each like little bit on this planet are little pods. It's kind of like a nothing planet. It's where you go to jump to other worlds, so it's like a stopover type thing. And the sort of proprietor of this stop and her child are there running this, and they've got these, races alien races that they don't necessarily know a lot about. And really, this again is about people. These people are so different. There's so many different cultures, so many different things, so many different prejudices and ideas, and because they're stuck there, they end up kind of getting to know each other reluctantly. And if not liking each other, gleaning a new kind of respect for each other. It's just the discussions that are had in this, that are kind of like sneaked into the undertow of it, are absolutely stunning. It seems like a much longer book than it actually is, but it was absolutely fantastic. I don't think this is my favourite. I'm stuck between the first one and the third one for my favourites, but this is definitely just absolutely fantastic. I loved it so much. It's just this, again, it's about family and different kinds of love and friendship and just people. That's the thing. Becky Chambers writes about people, and she does it through a vector, through the guise of writing about aliens and their interactions in different species, and it's just fantastic. These are such cozy sci-fi books. I love them so much. I just, like, I could read Wayfarer novels forever. The next and penultimate thing that I read in the month of March was Beneath the Keep by Erika Johansson. I didn't know what to think of this book at first because it's like a feudal medieval style prequel to the Tearling saga, or the Tearling trilogy, but this makes it a saga, I suppose. And it is such a hard, horrible world where the queen's power is absolute and she is not great. And then on top of that, there's a drought, so people are dying. The nobles and the rich people are living it up because they've got water supplies and they've got food supplies, but the normal people are dying. On the meanwhile, there's this sort of underground tunnel area called the Creche, which is basically, think of the worst things people can do. There is fighting for money. Like, one of our main characters is I don't even want to call it like a bare knuckle boxer, because when he fights to kill. Like, the whole point is that they bet on him, like they bet money for these fights, and if you lose, you die. Like, it's awful. Children are sold and bought. Prostitution is huge. Like, one of the sort of side characters in this is a little girl, who like doesn't quite understand emotion properly, who has been sold as a prostitute. There's one specific place in the creche where this guy only buys unusual children, so he's got dwarves, an albino, all these different kinds of children that he buys to prostitute, and it's awful. The people in this are awful. Like, the people surrounding the characters that you follow are awful, and they are horrible, horrible, child molesting, awful people, and I hate them all. And so does Erika Johansson, because dear God, like, no God could smite like this woman smote. Like, the graphic depictions of how these characters, these horrible men, are killed for what they do by one of the characters who has had enough. Oh, it's beautiful, and I feel like some of this should be brought out into real life, because there's plenty of people who deserve this. That might be very extreme for some people, but god damn, I am on Lazarus' side for some of this. But yeah, so basically it follows Lazarus, who was the fighter, as he gets out of the creche. It follows Nia. I can't remember her name exactly. I can't remember how it's said. Who is a maid for the princess, but is also part of this underground sort of, they're called the Blue Horizon. They're trying to sort of usurp the throne and go back to the utopia that this world was meant to be. This is basically a lead up to like, it's like 16 years or something, 17 years before the Queen of the Tearling. So it's interesting. It's definitely interesting, because we know the Queen of the Tearling starts and the world is awful, but the princess in this wants to make the world good again, and obviously something goes horribly and terribly wrong, and it basically just follows that. And yeah, it's really, like, a lot goes on. It's this book absolutely spun my mind, but I ended up really liking it. So that was my last physical book. The next book I read or listened to on audio was Beneath the Sugar Sky by Shauna Maguire. This is the third book in the Wayward Children series. This is, a lot of people say this is Sumi's book, but I don't see it as Sumi's book. They do go to whatever land it is. It's like a sugary confection land or something like that. Confection. I think it's just called confection, where everything's made of cake and cookies and sweets and like it's a dentist nightmare. And basically Sumi's daughter appears at Miss Eleanor West's Wayward Children School. I can't say it every time. Sumi's daughter appears and she's disappearing because Sumi something happens to Sumi and they need to get her back. So they go through this whole process. A few of them from the school, Cora specifically is one of them, and they have to go through all these different places to try and get her back, get Sumi back and restore Sumi's daughter to her, self. That's all I can really say about this. Like, it's basically like a good little short adventure story, and this is the part that I wanted. Like, this is the part of the story that I thought was missing in Down Among the Sticks and Bones. This is the adventure part. This is the let's go on a quest to save our friend section of the book that I thought was missing in Down Among the Sticks and Bones. But this is different characters, different place, and I really, really liked it, which is really surprising. So I do have the others in audiobooks, so I will probably just continue to listen to them. Hopefully they'll be as good as that. It'll be interesting to see some other things, because one of the characters, someone will say something to her and she'll be like, I'm a drowned girl. She refers to herself as a drowned girl, and they all seem to know what that means, and I don't know what that means. And obviously you find out there's a book literally called Where the Drowned Girls Go, so it's going to be interesting to read, so I'm really looking forward to that. So yeah, like, I didn't like the first two books. The first one left me intrigued enough to keep reading the second. Second one, really didn't like it. Third one, gave it a chance. Really, really fantastically loved it. So I will continue with those. But yeah, so all that rambling should have told you my wrap up for the rest of March. That is the second half of March. The rest of the 31 books that I read. I'm absolutely stunned that I managed to read that many books. Like, who am I? I definitely won't be doing that in April. My April TBR is much smaller, but I also am not going to be mad if I don't get to everything. April is meant to be an overreaching TBR, so I'm not going to put the stress on myself to read that much. But the fact that I've actually managed to do 31 books in 31 days, that's all that matters. Like, I'm really proud of myself. I feel like this wrap-up got a wee bit away from me, which is fine, because it happens. And I'm still just absolutely stunned that was only half the month. Like, just wow. So if you've read any of these books and want to discuss them with me, as always, please let me know in the description. Why do I always say that? In the comments. Please talk to me in the comments. DM me if you want to talk about spoilers. On my Twitter and stuff like that, it's linked below, so you can have a look at that. But yeah, thanks very much for watching another video. All my links are down below for everything. The Twitter, Instagram, whatever. And any links that allow you to support me. We've got a script link for 2 months, I think it is, free script for you, and other things like that if you want to support me. So yeah, I'm still a little bit shell-shocked about how many books I've read, but I'm gonna go. And again, thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.